Hello and welcome to the CFB Super Show, brought to you, as always, by the world-famous FTN Network. I'm your host, Walt Waddell, a.k.a. Dub Deuce 85. Coming to you back again this week to do our thing. We're talking about college football. Week 0 is a mere couple of weeks away. It's unfathomable how close it really is. Saturday, August 26th will be Week 0 of the college football season. I sit here before you on August 9th on the West Coast. If you're in the East Coast and from the future, it's now August 10th. We are just a couple of weeks away. Going to finish up doing a couple more previews. I'm going to talk about the AAC this week. Next week, I'm really going to start to delve into the odds for Week 0, some initial things about the teams. And then the week after that, I'll have my partner in crime, Jake, on, and we're going to break down the full slate with pricing and everything when that does come out. So that's what you can expect. Tonight being the last of the preview shows. Didn't get into the Sun Belt, but that's okay. When Sun Belt stuff comes on, we'll go in depth on it. But I did want to get a chance to talk about the AAC. Lots of teams in the AAC, Houston, Cincy, we know out of there, but they're still going to be a competitive conference, and for the most part, a pretty fantasy-friendly conference at that. Lots of good stuff happening. My content-wise, NFL preseason. I will be covering the preseason slate that is happening tomorrow, as well as multiple slates throughout the preseason. Also going to be talking about college basketball foreign trips. That's just going to be something I'm doing on my Twitter or whatever they call it now. X, marks the spot, I guess. But I'm going to be talking about and rounding up all those foreign trips that teams made. Who was a somebody, high caliber player that performed like we thought, who didn't perform all that well, and who was a bit of a surprise. Really get you geared up and ready for the college basketball season as well. We really are in a time where I don't sleep. John Rothstein doesn't sleep. We're talking about college sports. We've been able to grind through WNBA, TBT, but really this is just kind of the vacation for me. I really get into that grind now, and really the Team No Sleep starts on August 26th. I do want to point out the stuff behind me is starting to come together. You guys remember last week I added to the collection. Which way am I going? Added to my collection the First Cause figure. And then just earlier today, we got the newest edition here, the big boy Cause. This is going to be the good luck charm for us for this season. You see, he's got the money in his hands right there. These going to be the Cause play of the week when we have it. Lots of exciting stuff. Still building it out. Still going to have a setup to just improve upon, a better camera, all this stuff. Really excited to bring you guys content this year, and I'm just super jazzed about my Cause figures right now. And if we can win some GBPs, maybe we can add some bear bricks to the comp, the collection there. Those of you who are familiar with those know how much money those can cost. All right. Also, there is chatter in the Slack of FTN about doing a CFB season-long league. If that happens, we will be having a draft. There'll be, CFB experts, not only from a DFS perspective like myself and Jay Kuchek, but also on the betting team, season-long guys, all that stuff. NFL guys will be in it. Then what we'll do if that happens is we'll throw a show up, and I'll get a hold of the powers that be, and we'll kind of talk about how the draft went, players we like, stuff like that, and set it up. For those of you who are getting into season-long or dynasty, it's getting to be a very popular, much more popular than years past when it comes to college football. There are the dynasty leagues that have, you draft guys from college into the NFL and build your team that way. So there's a lot of fun, different aspects to it beyond just the DFS standpoint. So that is also in the pipeline, possibly happening really, really soon. All right, let's dive into the AAC. And I'm going to do what I've been doing for these previews pretty much the whole way through, kind of talking about projected depth charts, players to be aware of, and really, basically going through and just kind of getting our whistles wetted here and talking about the various options at the offensive positions that we really care about and working through team by team. And I want to start with, not in alphabetical order on this one, but with Tulane. Tulane's a team that I think a lot of people are going to write off right off the bat. They have their quarterback coming back, which is huge, but the Greenway, they lose FTN brand favorite and secret weapon for several weeks. Tyjae Spears, who became just a household name very, very quickly. Wasn't a secret for very long for us. An absolute smash play week in and week out. He goes to the NFL, where he will likely make some noise at some point. So people are going to think right away, they don't have him. That's going to be tough. They lose 5 of their top 6 wide receivers. That's going to be tough. What are they going to do here? Well, they got Michael Pratt back, who honestly it feels like he's been in college football for a long time. Nobody would have years ago really thought of him as an NFL arm or an NFL prospect, but he really played his way into being an NFL prospect last year. And I think without Tyjae Spears around, he's going to be asked to do a whole hell of a lot more, whether that's with his legs, which we've seen him do, or with his arm. Now, he does have Jaquan Jackson back. That's going to be somebody who he's very familiar with. Losing Deuce Watts, that's tough. They do bring in Dante Fleming, who comes in from the University of Louisiana, not LSU, but the Ragin' Cajuns. Definitely a productive receiver during his time there. They also bring in another transfer out of Texas A&M, Yule Keith Brown, lesser used guy there, but SEC talent. That is pretty huge to get a player of his caliber in there. Lawrence Keys, who is a pretty big field stretcher. Keys, originally out of Notre Dame, somebody with, a lot of talent, hasn't really seen that talent through, but honestly can break a game open with his speed. So it'll be interesting to see how they use him as well. And at the running back spot, they do have Shaddy Clayton Johnson, who's a familiar name, and then pretty much unfamiliar names from there. However, if you did follow other football programs such as Liberty, you'd see they do bring in the transfer Shedro Lewis out of Liberty, somebody who I would anticipate being in a similar role that what we just saw Tyjae Spears in, as far as being a pass catcher type of running back, able to handle a lot of carries. Now you look at his stats over the last couple of years, had his best season for Liberty 2 years ago in 2021, rushed for 446 yards, 4 touchdowns, caught 18 passes for 202 yards and 2 touchdowns, 9 catches for 81 yards last year. There was a pretty deep backfield on Liberty last season, so I'm not surprised to see that. But looking at what he could be getting carries wise, 150 plus. He did have 122 carries last year, 529 yards, 8 touchdowns, solid touchdown equity in that deep Liberty offense. And the fact of the matter is, throughout the course of his 4-year Liberty career, almost 400 yards, 36 catches, a couple of touchdowns. So he can definitely fill in that Tyjae Spears role. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's a Tyjae Spears talent. Spears, we really were on that one early, noticing how good he could be. I don't foresee Lewis putting up those kind of numbers, but I think he'll be adequate enough. And the fact that he'll be able to take some pressure off of Pratt to a degree as well, and allow him to do some of the things that he does. So I like this Tulane offense. I think that people expecting a huge drop off. I think I saw win totals like on DK at like 9.5, perhaps. That feels pretty high, but I do think they're going to be obviously a bowl team, and I think they'll be threatening for a conference championship as well. Because you might remember, it wasn't those teams that left for the Big 12, such as Houston or Cincinnati, that won the conference. It was Tulane, and they certainly have the weapons to continue to be a DFS-friendly offense and also win some games. All right, moving around here to the Charlotte 49ers. This is a team that is a college, really, that should be better. I kind of talk about it in the CBB chat room a lot on FTN, the Discord. There's just so many teams in the North Carolina area, South Carolina, all the Carolinas in general, and a team like Charlotte should be able to put together a winning program, whether that's basketball or football, and they just haven't been able to do that. They did have a really nice group of talent last year, guys like Chris Reynolds at the helm, got injured a bunch, tons of talent at the wide receiver spot. We've talked about at length about how those guys all transferred out. It really should have been a better season for Charlotte. Unfortunately, it wasn't, and they ended up being pretty awful overall. And I don't know that things are going to necessarily get all that better for them this year. Looking at it, they do bring in Jalen Jones, transfer out of Bethune-Cookman and Jackson State. That's going to be tough. I don't particularly love what the group of quarterbacks here that they have. Also a JUCO transfer in let me pull it back up here. Micah Bowens, who is a transfer out of Penn State. He's a red shirt at one time. So Bishop Gorman kid, a lot of pedigree there. Perhaps he wins the gig. Definitely a lot of production to fill with Reynolds gone. I don't know that any of those guys will be as good as Reynolds. And the line did not hold well last year. I don't think the line will hold well this year either, but we'll see. They have transfers on the entire left side of the line. There's only one returner on the offensive line, and it's looking like it could potentially be another tough season. I hate to say that for Charlotte because, again, they should be better. Jaden Bradley transfers in as a wide receiver from Pittsburgh. DeMatha kid there, again, pedigree talent, will have every opportunity to perform well and get targets. West Virginia transfer Randy Fields, originally at UT Martin. And Jack Hestera, who is a sophomore transfer out of Colorado. So a lot of new faces in this Charlotte offense. They're looking for somebody to take the reins, somebody to step up here. And I think this is going to be a team that honestly struggles a lot. They do have Chadrick Byrd back at running back. He put up some productive numbers in the last couple of seasons. And then a freshman in Darrell Robinson and Teron Kelman at running back. So a lot of uncertainty here for the Charlotte team and not a lot of excitement whatsoever for me on this program. Moving on to the East Carolina Pirates, no Holton Ehlers. That feels bad, man. I feel like Ehlers had been there forever as well. We had a lot of good times with him and a lot of rough times with him. He was always super cheap, and he had some slate-breaking performances. He had some low-end performances, but he's gone. They are going to be looking at some younger guys. They do bring in a freshman by the name of Raheem Jeter and then Mason Garcia there. Who's likely going to get the starting gig. At running back, you have Jake's guy, Marlon Gunn, somebody who he was very high on at times last year, and Rajay Harris. Those two will likely split the running back carries. Gerald Green is a grad transfer out of Kansas who is in the backfield as well. At wide receiver, a familiar face in Josiah Hatfield and Jalen Johnson. And they do bring in a couple of transfer wide receivers, one being Keelan Robinson out of Kansas. Redshirt sophomore there, and then a transfer by the name of Jace Sowell. So they're bringing in some new faces. Sowell is another transfer out of Colorado, lesser used guys there. So East Carolina, I think Gunn has proven his ability to be a pretty solid option. I think he's actually going to be a higher end type running back that people are probably not going to use. I think we'll see him be pretty cheap early on and go relatively ignored. People know the name Rajay Harris. When you look at it last year, let's pull up those East Carolina stats. You had Keaton Mitchell with almost 1,500 rushing yards, Rajay Harris with 238 in the 5 games, and then Marlon Gunn rushed for 344, 14 catches for 77 yards for him. Keaton Mitchell, 27 catches for 252 yards. So that's a lot of production gone, 201 carries. Both Harris and Gunn toted the rock 67 times each. Difference being Gunn a YPC of 0.1, Harris only 3.6. So a pretty big disappointing year for Harris. Couldn't get going. Obviously, there was some health stuff there, but you looked at his freshman season, he rushed for almost 700 yards. And then his sophomore season, he rushed for just under 600. So certainly has talent. That sophomore season, he had a YPC of just 3.5. So still churned out almost 600 yards, but very low end yardage guy, gets tough yardage, but doesn't really turn a lot of big plays up out there. I think that's where Marlon Gunn's going to come into play. Also, Harris hasn't shown himself to be a consistently productive pass catcher out of the backfield. He did catch 24 passes for 160 yards 2 years ago, but we'll have to see how that works out. I do like Gunn there mainly as the RB1, I think, ultimately. Mason Garcia stepping in, only 12 passing attempts, 54 yards. It was the whole Nealer show around here for a long time, so that quarterback position is relatively unknown. And then wide receiver wise, again, Isaiah Winstead, 1,000-yard receiver, gone. CJ Johnson, 1,000-yard receiver, gone. You have Jalen Johnson back, who caught 26 passes for 340 yards and 4 touchdowns. And Josiah Hatfield, 11 catches for 178 yards. I think Hatfield's a lot better than he probably looked there. He missed some games last year. there was just so much production with Winstead coming in there. There wasn't enough football to go around. We've seen Hatfield had some productive games in the past. 2 years ago, 15 catches for 294 yards, almost 20 yards per catch there, and 3 touchdowns. A big play threat to be certain. I'm certainly a fan of Hatfield, and I think he can be pretty good in this offense, depending on what we can get out of the quarterback spot. All right, moving right along here to the Florida Atlantic Owls, and this is a team that I'm semi-excited about. They have had some really, like for DFS purposes, solid quarterback over the last couple of years. Now they bring in 2 on the transfer market here. Let me first pull up last year's stats so we can see what we're dealing with here. By the way, shout out to our man Mike Randall, who's FAU boys basketball-wise absolutely smashed. Football program has a chance to do the same. 5-7 last year, but I think they can have a winning record. But N'Kosi Perry, 2,700 yards, 25 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, a really solid season for him last year. Obviously not going to be around there, but FAU's had the benefit of having some really solid guys around. Perry there for a couple of seasons obviously had, the pedigree of a high-end quarterback coming out of high school, ends up at FAU, puts up some decent numbers there. And now we're looking at a situation where they bring in Casey Thompson, transferring in from Nebraska, and obviously Texas. I think he can be big in this offense. That Nebraska offense in the first couple of weeks looked really almost video game-esque, and then the wheels fell off, of course. So I think in the right situation, Casey Thompson can be a really consistently productive, I should say, option that we can possibly even use in our main lineups depending on what the slate looks like. And that might, hurt a couple people's feelings or make people confused. But Casey Thompson is actually pretty decent at football, I got to say. They also have, if I can get my internet to stop doing this to me, Daniel Richardson coming in, another transfer at the quarterback position. They actually have 3 total transfer quarterbacks coming in, 2 of which battling it out for playing time between Casey Thompson and Daniel Richardson, who transfers in from Central Michigan. Richardson on max slates had some fairly productive games, some slate-breaking type games, and then he had games, especially last year, where he completely disappeared and was not even an option, even at prices of $6K or below. And also Ben Ballard transfers in from Texas as a grad transfer clipboard holder. All right, running back for this team, Larry McCammon is back. McCammon, big-time production throughout. The FAU running backs throughout the years have actually been pretty reliable fantasy options. I think people maybe sometimes forget this offense because they just don't win games. Defensively, they're pretty sour, and their offense has to turn in big production to keep up. And the running back spots actually were pretty good last year. McCammon was a 1,000-yard rusher on 193 carries, 7 touchdowns, 15 catches for 166 yards, and a score there as well. So McCammon back, that's big. They also have a transfer, Kobe Lewis transferring in. Now, Kobe Lewis, and he's good. People probably don't know he's good because situationally he just couldn't get into the game very often. He couldn't get carries, despite the fact that in his early collegiate career, he was a big-time producer. 2019 for Central Michigan, kind of reuniting with QB there, he rushed for over 1,000 yards. That feels so long ago at this point that people aren't going to remember. And his YPC that year was almost 6 on 182-yard carry. So he was a big-time running back, 12 touchdowns, also caught 23 passes for 164 yards. 2020 in Central Michigan, 6 games, had to miss time, got some injuries there, 468 yards, 6 touchdowns, 17 catches, 106 yards. Didn't play in the 2021 there, and then transfers to Purdue, where it seemed like, man, Kobe Lewis coming in, damn near price. Look what he did in the past. If he's any kind of healthy, he's going to be awesome. And he played 13 games. And if you would have said, hey, he's going to play 13 games, okay, wow, he might be a 500-yard guy, maybe even more. He's going to have 5-6 touchdowns at minimum, this is going to be great, especially in that Purdue offense that churns out point after point and excitement after excitement. But that just didn't happen. 13 games, yes, but 43 carries, a YPC of 3.4, which was a career low, 146 yards, no touchdowns to speak of, 7 catches for 56 yards, and just could not get consistent time. Now he transfers again to FAU, which I think could be intriguing, but I think he's going to get a little lost in the shuffle because coming up behind McCain, who's already a 1,000-yard runner, I don't know that there's going to be a ton of work for Kobe Lewis, although the situation does look better for him than it did at Purdue because Purdue had legitimately 3 or 4 running backs that they could use at any given time. FAU is more likely to use 2, mainly with a couple of other guys getting spot carries. So I'll be interested to see how Lewis works out. Ending his career here in FAU, it's certainly better. Can't be any worse than last year, I would say. And if he's healthy, then he can definitely be playable. It'll just be depending on what that price tag looks like, and that'll be one of those things where it's like a 3 or 4 game slate. We're not talking about FAU on a 10-game slate here. We wouldn't be using him, of course. At the running back or the wide receiver position, maybe I should get some sleep, getting tongue-tied once in a while. They have a lot of production coming back. The eternal one, Javion Posey, LaJonte Weister, Jaquan Burton, BJ Alexander. There is a ton of guys returning that have a lot of experience in this offense. Devin Price transfers in from Texas A&M, so another guy with SEC talent transferring into this conference. Certainly going to be an intriguing look. Now you look at the wide receiver production for FAU a season ago. Weister, who started out kind of rough, really came on later. Over 100 rushing yards. They use him in a myriad of ways. Over 700 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns, led all receivers with touchdowns. Jamal Adrian, 570 yards, 6 touchdowns. Jaquan Burton, who was back, 517 and 4. And then Tony Johnson, 258 and 3. Javion Posey, just 5 for 64, 4 carries for 19. He was much more productive in the past. I thought Posey would do a lot more. You look at what happened. He didn't play a full season, of course, 4 games. Look out if he gets full run this time. So Casey Thompson, if he wins the job, looking at Weister, looking at Jaquan Burton, there's some definitively decent enough options in this offense that I think Casey Thompson can be a bona fide QB1 in the right slate. And that might make some people perturbed, but I think Casey Thompson's actually pretty decent at football, but maybe I'm just holding on to the dream there. One last chance for him to go out on a high note for us as fantasy players. Alrighty then, moving on to the Memphis Tigers. Seth Hennigan is back under center. Love Seth Hennigan, always worth paying the price on these weekday slates that Memphis seems to be on, or the smaller slates. Certainly a guy that, as long as he's not like 9K or something like that, he's always going to be playable. And even on certain slates at 9K, he's going to be a very strong asset to us. Over 3,500 passing yards last year, 22 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, completed 64% of his 445 passes, also rushed for 300 yards for good measure and punched it in 4 times. So Hennigan is definitely one of the better QBs in this conference. We'll have to work with. Now, running back for Memphis is, been kind of frustrating the last year or two, right? Last year, they had Javon Ducker, who transfers from a MAC school, Asa Martin, who several people love, Brandon Thomas, who was supposed to be the heir apparent, or at least I thought so. And they ended up with just, 5-6 guys who rushed over 100 yards. Javon Ducker led the team with 544 yards, did score 7 touchdowns. Asa Martin, 435 yards, 7 touchdowns, 36 catches for 312 yards and a touchdown. Asa Martin ended up being the most productive from a fantasy standpoint. Then you have Seth Hennigan there, QB, running for almost 300. Brandon Thomas in 9 games, 270 yards only. He did score 9 times. So a lot of touchdown equity there for these Memphis running backs, but the yardage wasn't really there. Fine for FanDuel, maybe not so much for DK on a regular basis. He did catch 3 passes for 19 yards. Certainly not the season that we were hoping for from Brandon Thomas. Now, Javon Ducker is back. That's great. think he has the opportunity to be very, very good. Sutton Smith returns 135 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 catches, 58 yards season to go. So there's a little bit of production there. They do bring in a couple of transfers at this position. Blake Watson, who comes in from Old Dominion. Blake Watson was ridiculously profitable at times for an Old Dominion team that I think maybe underperformed per expectations. I thought ODU would be a lot better of a fantasy option than they were, and it ended up really just being the Blake Watson show, whether they got down or not. He did rush for over 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns, 10 catches for 55 yards, a score there as well. So look for Blake Watson to, share carries with Ducker, but I think they're clearly not bringing him in to just be a Asa Martin, 50-50 guy. I think if anything, maybe 70-30 at times. Ducker will have his moments. Ducker will score. Ducker's going to have, some good games, but Blake Watson's not coming in here to not get a bulk of the carries. I'm fairly confident in that. So Hennigan with a strong running back group behind him, and Brandon Thomas still milling around there somewhere. And Credravian Hargrove transfers in from Mississippi State. So yet another SEC, lesser known SEC talent coming into this conference. You're going to see that quite a bit throughout. At the wide receiver spot, it's going to be slightly different. Looking at what's gone, what returns, Hennigan's going to have some new weapons at his disposal. All right, so Caden Prescorn's gone. We know that. Caught 600 yards, 7 touchdowns, 48 receptions. Eddie Lewis, 600 yards, 41 receptions, 7 touchdowns. Gabriel Rogers, 40, 489. And Jason Ivory, 46, 586, and 2. They also do bring back Joseph Scatz, who caught 18 passes for 412 yards and 4 touchdowns. So Scatz comes back. Rock Taylor in the mix. Rock Taylor caught 20 passes for 225 yards and a touchdown. He's back. And then they do have Toski Dove coming in from Missouri. Toski Dove, that always cheap receiver who you can talk yourself into on that Missouri team, and then you wished you didn't. Couldn't even pay off his cheap prices. And then Demir Blancumes, who transfers in from Toledo. That's a name that you're probably not going to be as familiar with, but coming into this Memphis offense, somebody who I think will be able to at least look at. There's several options in this Memphis receiver room that at least seem intriguing enough to keep an eye on, but it might be one of those situations where we take a game or two to see how that pecking order kind of pans out, because they do have a lot of new faces and it's going to be a little bit different. And we're also going to see a lot of carries in this offense, I think. All right, so that is Memphis. Now we move on to Navy. We gotta be looking at the Navy wide receivers, because this is an offense that likes to throw the football. Never mind. So running backs are the name of the game. Fullbacks, they're gonna have like 19 of them. Some of these triple option service academy schools actually have some wide receivers who are somewhat intriguing. I don't know that Navy is one of them. Quarterbacks still milling around there. Ty Levitai, Xavier Arline, Blake Horvath. So those are the QB names that get carries. You have Daba Fofana, who is a familiar name from last year. He had a bit of popularity on some Navy slates there at times. Anton Hall, Amin Hassan, Fabian France, and Brandon Chapman. So a lot of different names here to look at when it comes to Navy slates, Service Academy slates in general, especially if they're showdown slates. That tends to be the real, if you're a true D-Gen, you want to play a Navy showdown, then go for it, because you could have 6 running backs and you're looking at it. Tons of yardage, of course. Fofana rushed for 770 yards, the leader. McQuell Haywood, 473. Anton Hall, 390. Xavier Arline, 376. Ty Levitai, 309. And Vincent Terrell, 238. So the familiar names that we'll be looking at: Fofana, and Hall. And then there's going to be a ton of other guys getting carries, and that's going to be a game-to-game basis thing. And we'll be definitely seeing, as we get into it, depth charts and have some game to look at, beat writer stuff. So not going to get too in-depth with Navy here because it's just really no point. All right, the North Texas Mean Green. The alumni team of North Texas Bleed Green had a pretty damn good showing in the TBT tournament, by the way. So a little bit of momentum there for that program, if there's any North Texas fans out there. At the running back spots, some familiar names. Ayo Adeji, Ikala Ragsdale, so Isaiah Johnson, familiar names, guys who are going to get a lot of touches in this offense. And then at the quarterback spot, Jace Reuter there to hold the clipboards. Chandler Rogers, who was at Southern Miss and ULM at different points, looking like the guy that's going to have every opportunity to start. North Texas offensively, when it comes to their passing game, not super excited. It's going to be a situation where I'm constantly looking to get their running backs in. They do have Roderick Burns back, who one of the better options in that receiver room, Jamori Macklin and Damon Ward. And then they do bring in a couple of transfers, Blair Conwright and Trey Cleveland. Trey Cleveland coming from Texas Tech. You may remember that name from those Texas Tech slates where they had 9+ receivers to choose from at different times. Let's pull up. Let's see if we can make some predictions here on touches. All right. So Ragsdale rushed for 755 yards last year. Attaway 583. Johnson 246. And Adeji 807. All ranging from 3 to 7 touchdowns. Likely going to be the case again. Johnson, pretty intriguing. Just 54 carries last year in 10 games compared to 100+ of the other three. But a YPC of almost 5. Decent enough receiver. So I do like Isaiah Johnson if his touches were to go up. But otherwise, we're looking at take the cheapest of this group here on a game or a slate-to-slate basis. And sorry for Jake Kuchek, our guy. Austin On is no longer around for him to tout. Sorry, Jake. All right, next team on our list, the Rice Owls. They have some pretty damn good receivers. Do they have anyone to throw the? If only they had somebody to throw the football, right? Like, man. They've had some mediocre quarterbacks the last season or two. They really need a name brand guy that could come in that, maybe somebody who has a little bit of eligibility left or, about to hang him up or, lost his job not once, not twice, but like 3 times to a super walk-on, couldn't even graduate college type player. Who does that? Who could be the quarterback for Rice? Let's see. Who could that be? Oh, yeah, JT Daniels. JT Daniels is going to be the quarterback for Rice. USC, Georgia, West Virginia. He continues to just play everywhere he can. I want to like JT Daniels. I want to use JT Daniels. I want to be able to, like, that week where everyone's like, oh my God, JT Daniels is no good. And he's like 2% ownership. And we're like, you know what? We're coring JT Daniels. Let's do it. And he goes off for 40. Not a great opportunity for that to happen, but I do think Rice will let him sling it around a little bit. Kind of intrigued by JT Daniels, but I find myself saying that every year since he left USC. Like I'm just like, the West Virginia JT Daniels I thought was going to be awesome, and that wasn't the case. So we'll see, but he's got an opportunity here where he's going to see some defenses that are less than stellar. There are some good ones in this conference, and he's going to be involved in some shootouts. So he's going to have his opportunity to drop back and throw 35+ at certain times. And he has a receiver room that he can definitely work with as long as he doesn't make any bonehead errors. and that is something that he's going to have to overcome, of course. Looking at the receiver room, Brad Rosner's back, who had almost 900 yards, 10 touchdowns. Luke McCaffrey, 723 yards, 6 touchdowns. Isaiah Esdale, 544 yards, 2 touchdowns, and Jack Bradley, 260 yards and 2 touchdowns. So that was the top 4 last year. When you look at some of the potential or not potential, the predictive depth charts, obviously there's going to be a lot to replace here. Production wise, I believe McCaffrey, the only one who's going to end up still being there. There's over 1,000 yards that they do have to replace. I don't know. I want to see my man JT Daniels have a really big season, and I'm just looking at this Rice team, and I'm not so sure. Now, at running back, Ari Broussard there, Quentin Jackson, not Quentin Rampage Jackson, Juma Otoviano, and Dean Connors. Looking at the production at the running back spot last year, Cameron Montgomery, 561 yards, Juma Otoviano, 403, Ari Broussard, 251. Not a lead dog there. I think, if anything, we're going to be avoiding this team on a regular basis, or we're just going to go full send and take a naked JT Daniels or pair him up with McCaffrey there and hope for the best. It doesn't look great. I don't want to pin my hopes on JT Daniels, but hey, maybe he turns it around this time. In his swan song, 4th time's a charm. All right, moving right along here. SMU's trying to sneak into the ACC. That's the latest there on whatever Twitter's calling itself now. And the rumor there is that they would give up 5 to 7 years of revenue sharing. I mean, do they really want to get out of the AAC that bad that they would give up potentially 7 years of money to get into the ACC, which is already a conference that people love to make fun of? That's just crazy. I feel pretty weird about SMU and the ACC. Our man Adam in the Discord talking about sports getting ruined. I don't know if I'd go that far, but some of these conference, changes are going to look pretty weird in terms of, hey, you got to travel from, the West Coast to deep in the East Coast in, the middle of winter. That might not be so great. So we'll see what happens there. Looking at their projected depth charts here, Preston Stone at quarterback. Alex Padilla transfers in from that vaunted offense, that really juggernaut of an offense that is Iowa. So maybe he'll get an opportunity there. They do have a ton of talent at the running back spot yet again. Kamar Wheaton, who we really like a lot. Tyler Levine. Jalen Knighton transfers in there. He's going to get carries. It was ridiculous last year because SMU running backs were so tough. I like Knighton a lot. When he was at Miami, I really liked his game. He's a good pass catcher. He can run real strong. But there's just going to be so many other guys getting carries here. And they also bring in LJ Johnson, who's a transfer from Texas A&M with a lot of talent, yet another SEC guy. So it's pretty rough to pinpoint an SMU running back. It's going to be one of those situations where, yeah, you're taking whoever's the cheapest maybe, but at the same time, it's literally going to be a week-to-week thing. Like Levine may bust out for weeks 1 through 3. Wheaton gets, week 4. LJ Johnson ends the season strong. So it's going to be pretty tough. We know this SMU offense can put up points regardless of who's at the helm. At the wide receiver spot, Jake Bailey, a healthy Jake Bailey, I'm really excited about. Jordan Curley back, Moochie Dixon, Roderick Daniels. Plenty of talent here at these wide receiver spots. Transfer-wise, Jordan Hudson comes in from TCU. And Keyshawn Smith comes in as a grad transfer from Tech. Sorry, pull up the right page here. From Miami. So this offense is still going to be good regardless of some of the new faces. The running back room is still going to tilt you beyond belief. You're not going to absolutely – you're not going to have a week-to-week basis with this SMU running back that's ever not going to tilt you beyond belief. That's for damn sure. So let's move along to the next squad here. The South Florida Bulls. This is a team that I think has some intriguing pieces to it. Wide receiver-wise, they bring in a ton of new faces from the portal. Had to take advantage of that, had to bring in some talent. Michael Brown-Stevens comes in from Minnesota, who I think has an opportunity to be really, really good, statistically speaking. Somebody that I think we'll be using actually quite a bit, especially early on at a price that I assume will be cheap. Seth Jones transfers in from Baylor. Jaden Alexis transfers in from Texas. So several new faces that will be coming into the South Florida offense. And then they also have at the running back position, Kelly Joyner still milling around there, and then a upperclassman transfer at the running back spot in Naquan Smith. Naquan Wright. Now, South Florida is not going to be a team that has very exciting options typically. The quarterback spot is looking quite rough. They have some fresh faces coming in there. I see on some of the projected depth charts some Byron Brown, some chatter about the Bryce Archie kid. So we'll see what happens there. I think we'll see a lot of concentrated targets looking at it. They have like 10 to 12 different receivers right now that are getting talked about or in their team previews. I think targets-wise, Michael Stevens or Brown-Stevens is going to get a ton of work. Naheem Siemens and Seth Jones. So there's going to be a lot of question marks with this group as well. I think a lot of people are going to shy away from these AAC teams that aren't named SMU, Tulane, some of these squads, but there are going to be some guys that we can dig around here and possibly look at, and we'll be able to unearth early on in the season here for some of our usual leverage plays that we like to hang our hat on. All right, moving right along to the Temple Owls. We can probably not talk a whole hell of a lot about the Temple Owls. EJ Warner, Quincy Patterson at quarterback. At running back, you'll see Edward Sadie back and Davion Hebard. At the wide receiver spots, Ahmad Anderson, who I do like to a degree, Zay Baines, and they do have a transfer, somewhat intriguing transfer, Dante Wright, who comes in from Colorado State. Dante Wright had major production in the past, sort of fell by the wayside, somebody who I think if the quarterback situation in Warner can actually talk that I'm seeing, or the development that people have said he's had from the spring, then we might be able to unearth some guys here at this Temple team. Another team that most people are going to be looking the other direction on for the most part, I would say. Ahmad Anderson actually was fairly productive at times, especially on some of those smaller slates. And if Dante Wright can regain some of his form from his early seasons at Colorado State, then there is going to be a chance here for some of these Temple guys to look pretty decent for DFS purposes. And prop betting, I feel like props on some of these players for the AAC are going to be very low. Next week, we're going to talk about some of that prize picks props that we have on some of these players, and I think that we'll be able to take advantage to a degree. 805 yards in his freshman season, hasn't been able to really get back to that level, but a healthy Dante Wright would be pretty intriguing in this Temple offense. All right, the Tulsa group here. Braylon Braxton, Cardell Williams. I dropped a message in the Discord earlier. Cardell Williams getting a lot of chatter. I'm hearing that Nick Rempart is just going to be some sort of super sneak. He's an upperclassman. They have Malachi Jones back, Keith Willard there, but Nick Rempert's somebody who I'm seeing quite a bit of talk about. At the running back spots, Anthony Watkins, a familiar name, Jordan Ford, and then a sophomore transfer by the name of Braylon Presley. You may remember Presley from Oklahoma State. Definitely has pedigree and is actually pretty intriguing in this Tulsa offense, somebody that I feel can be a solid look. He's only a sophomore. We know what the other guys who are returning Tulsa and possibly be a kind of RB, the 4 running back lineups that we sometimes talk about, a candidate for that for sure. Let's pull this up real quick. All right. Rempart, one of the top wideouts. And Braxton hitting deep. They don't have the cameras on that, but they were talking about this play. Cardell Williams taking second team reps. Rempart getting a lot of hype. So that's the top 2, Rempart and Malachi Jones for Tulsa. We know that Tulsa wide receivers were really, really good for DFS purposes the last couple of years. So those are the 2 names to really pay attention to. Rempart originally came from a junior college spot, so I assume he'll be cheap early on. UAB, quarterback-wise, Jacob Zeno, Landry Liddy transferring in, Trace Campbell, and Harrison Barker. Liddy transfers in from Louisiana Tech, somebody that is decent and is having a decent camp. At the running back spot, Jermaine Brown, back, stud. They have Demetrius Battle transferred in, Isaiah Jacobs. There's going to be some guys who go for carries there, touchdown opportunities. Demetrius Battle comes from West Alabama, where he's actually pretty good. But still, Jermaine Brown, we know if he's expensive, he'll be well worth it. He's somebody who gets a lot of work in this offense. Wide receiver room, Malachi Holt Bennett transfers in. I wish my internet would not do it. Let's pull up their stats. From Indiana, let me pull up this. All right. So last year's top returners, well, obviously Trey Shropshire gone, almost 1,000 yards. Tejon Palmer, Samaro Rudolph, and TJ Jones, all of which had 200 to 400 yards. So there's going to be a lot of different pieces to look at here at the wide receiver spot. I don't know that I'm super confident in anyone on the wide receivers beyond the Indiana transfer don't look that great. Now, Brown rushed for almost 1,000 yards last year, which was solid, but you look at teammate Dwayne McBride, who rushed for almost 2,000, and you see just how often this team ran the football. 19 touchdowns on the ground for McBride, 8 for Brown, 19 catches for 120 yards. He was the better receiver of the 2. I think Brown, YPC of 5.7 is due a huge season. McBride rushed 7.4. YPC obviously out the door. Zeno, 721 yards a season ago, 5 touchdowns for 3 interceptions. Again, this is going to be an offense that I think we're looking at the running game a lot more than usual. All right, UTSA Roadrunners, they still have Frank Harris. Arguably, maybe not so arguably, had the best wide receiver room a season ago. DeCorian Clark, Joshua Cephas. really talented guys at the running back spot. They have Rocco Griffin coming in from Vandy, who I think can be really good. Kavorian Barnes, who has already shown he can handle a solid workload. So his UTSA offense is still going to be fairly solid, even though it will be slightly different. Just two of their three headed monster at wide. The wide receiver room right now is looking pretty lean. McCoy transfers in from Kilgore College, and I think we're going to see a very concentrated target share. Now, this offense last year supported those three wide receivers, all of them capable of putting up 1,000+ yards, right? With the main key pieces coming back, obviously, those two are going to get a ton of targets. Clark, kind of the third fiddle at times, or the least rostered option out of the Zachary Franklin, Cephas Clark group. But you see Clark 741 yards, 51 catches, 8 touchdowns. Franklin 94 catches, 1,200 yards, 15 touchdowns. Cephas 985 yards, 87 catches, and 6 touchdowns. So those stats, when you take a 1,200-yard receiver out, will obviously go way high. And then they also have guys like Oscar Cardenas. So this UTSA offense, this will be the popular one. This will be one that we can stack all the time whenever they're on the slate. Harris, you get tricky. You can run him naked sometimes because he's shown some rushing ability, but the UTSA triple stack will be a lot easier to decipher this year with Cephas and Clark around instead of all three. All right. So that wraps up AAC. Let's look at the early lines for week 0, and then we'll get out of here. Navy, who we just talked about, versus Notre Dame. Notre Dame 20-point favorites there. Okay. UTEP versus Jacksonville State is a pick'em. Interesting. UMass versus New Mexico State, 8-point favorites from New Mexico State. Ohio versus San Diego State, only 3.5-point favorites. That's interesting. Hawaii versus Vanderbilt, where Vandy is 18.5-point favorites. USC 30.5-point favorites versus a San Jose State team that, has some weapons. And then FIU versus Louisiana Tech, 10-point favorites there. That looks like a good betting opportunity for me on the FIU side. San Jose State giving 30 or getting 30 versus USC seems a little bit, but they still have Siobhan Cordero, still have Carreri Robinson, Nick Nash playing some wide receiver for them this year. Charles Ross still around, Justin Lockhart. Do their offense have the juice to keep up with USC there? Kind of feel like maybe, but it'll probably be a case where USC just scores like 70 or something crazy like that. So maybe not. Mountain West has some good teams. We're not going to have a chance to really talk about the Mountain West in a preview, but San Jose State's going to be a team that makes us a lot of money this year, no doubt. Especially when you look at what Siobhan Cordero is going to be able to do and turn loose in this offense and not have to kind of have anyone hanging over his head that if he plays bad, they'll be popping another quarterback in there. The Nick Nash at wide receiver thing is kind of interesting. We've seen some quarterbacks turn wide receivers in the past, turn into very productive players. Maybe that can be a situation for Nicky Nash there, but Justin Lockhart's going to have a huge season for them. So we'll see. I like this Hawaii team too, kind of against Vanderbilt. I'm not super keen on Vanderbilt beating anyone by 20+ points, but Hawaii is always a team that when they're at home, this won't be the case here, and they're giving points that you can bet on because Hawaii is a really tough place to play at. So that'll be an angle that we can definitely play. Might end up finding myself losing some money betting some of these underdogs here, especially early on. When you look at Hawaii, though, they've got some weapons that they can definitely turn to, and Braden Shaker is somebody who I think could have a decent enough season for them. But we'll see. There's going to be betting opportunities. We'll have the betting guys that we'll talk to that just came to FTN that I'm excited to chat with. Hopefully we'll get them on the Super Show as well and see other betting there. San Diego State 3.5-point favorites over Ohio. I absolutely love San Diego State. From a DFS standpoint, they haven't always been the most consistent or exciting, but we did do decently betting them last year, especially when they're small favorites or at home. They have a bunch of new faces throughout at multiple positions. They have a good amount of production at the wide receiver spot. I think they're going to be pretty solid group. The main transfers that are coming in, at least at the receiver spot, from Western Carolina, named to know Raphael Williams, who is going to be pretty solid, and a junior transfer by the name of Nino Remigio from Saddleback College. So some exciting sneak names there, perhaps, that we can look at. By the way, congrats to the Huskies, your Washington Huskies, for getting out of the Pac-12. That all did last week's show, along with the Oregon Ducks going to a real conference, the Big Ten, because the leadership of the Pac-12 fell on its face numerous times. So I'm quite excited to see that we'll be able to play in a conference where they actually put their product on TV for people to watch, not just a small conglomerate. And there's going to be a lot more opportunities for recruiting, while the Huskies NIL packages and programs are already one of the top in the country, believe it or not. Now they're going to be able to recruit to the Big Ten, which is going to be even bigger for them. So I'm actually a fan of some of these moves. Those are ones that, are the Huskies going to go into, Pennsylvania in November and just get frozen out? Maybe because in Seattle, we live our lives in total overcast, not rain, not sunshine, not rain like people think, but overcast. So we'll see what happens there, but I'm just excited. And I think that eventually we're going to move into these power conferences that are, 1A, 1B, just two giant conferences. And then maybe there'll be like one smaller one for, a different league. We'll see. And I think basketball is going to be effective, maybe to a negative degree, because some of these conferences that are better at basketball, or these teams that are better at basketball and football, might be confusing at first, with one being in a conference and one not. Seeing some interesting things out there for the remaining Pac-12 teams, such as Washington State, for example, or Stanford, getting with the MWC, the Mountain West, and creating a Pac-16, which is kind of interesting, or just outright going to the Mountain West Conference in general. I think basketball-wise, Washington State should go to the Big Sky, personally, but I don't feel bad for them at all. And I do think that Cal and Stanford both have shown, especially Cal the last couple of years, that they care more about academics. They're not really too involved in their sports programs lately, and that shows. Cal football and basketball have been awful. So I almost wonder if they'll either A, jump down in division, or B, just, basically abolish some of those programs and that sports and just do their thing as academic schools. Maybe they can join the Ivy League. I don't know. But Stanford's just good enough that they'll maintain their sports programs. But I think people are vastly overrating them and thinking that certain conferences are going to want to come calling for them, because I don't know that there's much money for a team like Cal to generate right now with how bad they are, regardless of who's at the helm for any sport. Of course, talking basketball and football. So a lot of changes coming up. The ACC is seemingly going to get SMU if the rumors are true, and it's going to be a ton of differences than what you're used to. And I think the important thing is to realize there's going to be a lot of people with the, college sports are over, it's ruined, it's going to be a pro sport now. And it's, when the transfer portal thing blew up, college sports are ruined. When one and dones were a thing, college sports are ruined. When, the president picks North Carolina to win the tournaments, college sports are ruined. Like everything that happens, college sports are ruined. So I think it's important to kind of stay grounded and realize that college sports aren't going anywhere. They're going to be popular as ever. And yes, some of these changes are going to be weird, but they're going to happen. NIL is a thing. The transfer portal is a thing. And at the end of the day, money is a thing. So wherever the money is with football, of course, they're going to lead to these changes, and there's going to be plenty more still to come. And I am very, very intrigued to see what happens with the 4 remaining Pac-12 teams. But I will say again, I care not about Washington State at all, and I would absolutely enjoy seeing them go to the Big Sky in football as well. So we'll wrap it up there. Appreciate it. We will be back next week to go into props, season-long numbers, talk a little bit more about week 0, and then the week after that will be the week 0 slate breakdown from a DraftKings and FanDuel perspective. Thank you very much. Appreciate the continued support, and I will see you guys next week.